was interesting to see was it actually jumped up to 63% of salespeople are struggling with their mental health. So you can now say more than 3 in 5 salespeople are struggling. And if you think about that, an industry like sales that's so focused on high performance, all of these different things. Here are these tactics to perform at your best. And what leaders and reps in the industry is failing to realize is that you can't perform your best if your mental health is not in a state where you're thriving and you're showing up your best self each day.
You're listening to the Sales Today podcast, and I'm your host, Fred Copestake. On this podcast, we explore how sales professionals can develop a more modern approach to selling, the application of virtual and hybrid selling techniques, how to create meaningful business relationships, and much more. And welcome to this episode of the Sales Today podcast, where I'm delighted to be joined by Jeff Risley, who is founder of the Sales Health Alliance. Jeff, welcome.
Hello, Fred. Excited to be here.
No, I am excited. I'm actually really pleased you're here, and probably feel a bit bad that you've not been here sooner, because today's discussion is all going to be about mental health in sales. Something I don't think we speak enough about. I know you don't think we speak enough about it, because it's important. I mean, you've just released a report, haven't you, with some pretty shocking figures in it. Can you just talk us through a couple of those?
Yeah, I mean, it was a wild report. So we release an annual report every year. I typically partner up with Uncrushed, amazing mental health organization, as well as Richard Harris from the Harris Consulting Group. And what we do every year is we sort of try to get a pulse or a snapshot on, how are salespeople feeling? How are they doing? Like, what's the state of mental health within sales? That just came out last week, actually. And what was interesting is if you looked at the 2021 report, you would have seen that 58% of salespeople mentioned that they were struggling with their mental health, that had over 700 responses from surveys. So this is like good data to look at, like really kind of a good sample size. So if you think about what that was, May 2021, that was sort of almost, peak COVID or just after peak COVID, and things were not great. And then this year we did it again. We thought, things must have improved. COVID sort of ending as we're going into the first real summer that we've had in the last sort of 2 or 3 years. How are people doing? And what was interesting to see was it actually jumped up to 63% of salespeople are struggling with their mental health. So you can now say more than 3 in 5 salespeople are struggling. And if you think about that, an industry like sales that's so focused on high performance, all of these different things. Here are these tactics to perform at your best. And what leaders and reps in the industry is failing to realize is that you can't perform your best if your mental health is not in a state where you're thriving and you're showing up your best self each day. So it was surprising, it's shocking, and we're also continuing to trend in the wrong direction. So I appreciate you having me on to talk about this, because I think it's really important for everyone to kind of be more mindful of.
Yeah, no, it is. And so what were some of the reasons? What are some of the reasons that you think this is going up, and what causes people to struggle?
Yeah, I mean, it's a multitude of different factors. And I think some of the things that we're seeing, there's definitely pandemic fatigue, and, business sort of operated as usual. Like we all, started working remotely. We went through this major stressor. Organizations did things like, the odd wellness day here or there, or they might have done the odd training here and there. But that really wasn't enough to tackle sort of the major stressor that the pandemic created. And the other thing that I think is really happening is if you think about what happened at the start of the pandemic, and we had to make these massive changes in lifestyles to go from working in the office full time to working at home, and how difficult that was. And the difficulty was also created a lot of uncomfortable emotions. People were crying, people were angry, people were, dealing with, uncertainty and high levels of anxiety. And they were dealing with these difficult emotions in the comfort of their own home, likely surrounded by friends and family. It was a safe space where they could openly discuss and be vulnerable. regardless of what was happening in the workplace. And now what you're seeing is you're asking people to make this massive shift back to either full-time work or hybrid work like that. And we're not aware that that change is going to be as equally, if not more stressful on the body when you then have to deal with the anger of the commute. You have to deal with the discomfort of learning how to communicate in person, or, someone is talking to you or has a bad habit that really bugs you. And if you're having all these people go back to the office and you haven't created an environment that's psychologically safe, where do you think those emotions are going to go? That's going to start to chew up our own mental health. It's going to start to impact our performance. And I saw that in the State of Mental Health and Sales report, where we looked at sort of things like vulnerability, where you see in 2021, 44% of salespeople felt like they could not be open and vulnerable with how they're feeling at work. Well, that's up 6% this year. So people can be even less vulnerable. So now we're sitting at, 51%. Half your team can't feel like they can be vulnerable at work, which is a huge, huge problem when it comes to coping and struggling and navigating the different stressors that salespeople face every day.
Let me just go back to make sure I've understood that. So vulnerability, or feeling that you can be vulnerable, is an important way of dealing with these unwanted emotions. Had I understood that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, it's like being able to be authentic, being able to open up and share what's actually happening versus trying to wear like a mask all day.
Okay, good. All right, you've answered my next question, which was okay. So, what does vulnerability mean? It's being authentic, not having to share the mask, not pretending. How are you getting on? Yeah, fine. All right. No, I'm not actually. I'm really struggling here. But people say, no, I cannot say that for whatever reason.
Or it's even like basic things, like if you're a new parent and you're a seller, and saying things like, being able to kind of start off the day with a conversation with your manager that says, hey, just so you know, like my newborn kept me up all night last night, so I'm not at 100% today, so if you go easier on me, or if I don't respond in a certain way, like that's why, I'm just a little tired. Like those types of micro conversations aren't happening. Or even if a leader, for example, starts off a team meeting that says, hey, like I'm feeling like the pressure of our team target. Like if I'm short with you today, like that's why I'm doing things to kind of focus on that and kind of sort of get back to baseline myself. Like if I don't respond to your Slack message, or I'm like respond in a certain way, like just know that I'm not upset with you. Like these are the conversations that can help build safety, help lead with vulnerability, and prevent situations where you're stressed, you send a Slack message that's maybe not as kind as you'd like it to be, that makes that other person on the other side feel like, holy crap, my boss hates me. Like that, those are the micro conversations that don't happen when there's not vulnerability.
Okay. So stress is going up, or stress. Normally, I'm pretty carefree with words. People who've listened to this will probably know that. Words are really quite important on this because some of the definitions to them. So I want to try and do it justice. So I'm sure you'll pick me up if I use something wrongly, as I'm again trying to make sense of this.
Totally.
So people are more stressed. People are struggling with mental health. Is that am I allowed to say both of those as a similar thing?
So there's two different. So when we sort of asked people how they would describe their mental health, and we gave them the options of sort of poor, fair, good, very good, and excellent. And the 63% rated the mental health as fair or poor. So it was not good. And if you think about sort of mental health, you want to think about it as a spectrum of well-being. Too many times we think mental health, we jump to mental illness. So we think of things only applying to when people are highly anxious or highly burnt out or schizophrenic. And what we have to realize is that it's very similar to physical health that operates on a spectrum. Just like there's people that are in shape or, overweight or obese or clinically unwell. There's people like from a mental health standpoint that are unwell. There's people that are struggling. There's people that are coping, and there's people that are thriving. So our goal, and my goal sort of through Sales Health Alliance, is to really help organizations understand that you've invested tons of resources. HR is focused on people that are unwell, like you're investing in EAP programs or therapists and all of these, or benefits to help people get access to medication, which is really, really important. But the vast majority of your organization, the employees that are showing up in these situations where they're struggling or they're coping, and they're not able to manage the stressors of the workplace in a mentally healthy way. And that's having a direct impact on your performance. So our goal as an organization, you as an organization, how do you equip your team with the various mindset, sort of mental health, resilience, stress management strategies that help you respond to missing target or deals falling through, or facing rejection in a way that doesn't impact your performance for very long, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. That's why I need the clarity. I thought I was mixing stress and mental health wrongly,
No,
if you like. It's part of it, but it's not the same as what I just heard there.
yeah. So stress is not inherently bad, but
Yeah.
stress is a factor that will have a direct impact on our overall mental health. Stress is really
Yeah.
important. Good levels of stress will help us perform and grow. When stress gets too high, it puts us into a point where we're unable to problem solve. We're unable to think logically. Something will happen, and we'll become emotional, and we'll react to it, and it'll stir up a lot of those emotions like anger or fear or panic that makes it really, really uncomfortable inside our head and inside our body, that impacts overall mental health and well-being.
Yeah. Okay. So again, going back to what you said there, that it's something that we need to be looking at. And we kind of said it before I hit record, which was that even if you were a totally uncaring, horrible human being that didn't really care for other human beings, you've still got a vested interest in getting this stuff right, because you've used the word performance 3 or 4 times now. And isn't that what we're trying to do at the end of the day? I mean, not just in sales, any job. Help people, perform as best they possibly can. They get this stuff right, they're going to do a better job.
Yeah.
Again, paraphrasing pretty bluntly.
Yeah. I mean, like, better mental health equals better mental performance, which equals better sales performance. It's just a fact. And there's so much data and research, especially that's come out in the last 25 years around things like positive psychology, or from fields of neuroscience, or peak performance. Like, all of this research is showing how important this is, and what humans need to show up and perform their best every single day. And I think one of the things that we're still struggling, not just within sales, is there's still this idea that, fear-based management is the most effective way to motivate people and the most effective way to drive performance. And what people don't realize is fear-based management really stemmed from, essentially, I think, started in the auto industry back in the early 1900s, and was created when Henry Ford really put in all sorts of management practices that focused on fear. I think back then it took about 12 hours for a car to go through an assembly line, and all of these new practices came in, fear-based management and things to kind of motivate people through extrinsic motivators. They were able to shorten it to 3 hours. So all of a sudden, they were the industry leaders, just like we look at Google, or we look at sort of maybe not Meta today, or we look at or Twitter, maybe we look at a Google today.
All your examples have been blown out in the last week.
I know, exactly. But we look at these organizations, and we look to best practices. So back then it was the auto industry. So all of these best practices of, how to get the best from your team was distributed across all of the different industries, and still exists today. And where managers, where leadership sort of executives are really missing this piece is, yes, and this is backed up by research outside of the workplace, yes, using things like incentives and fear work really, 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 really well at motivating someone. But the thing that they're missing is it really works really, really well at motivating someone who's doing a highly repetitive and non-complex task, like working on an assembly line. It'll make people work very, very quickly on an assembly line. But our work today, specifically within sales or any other kind of, white collar job, is highly complex. It's not that repeatable. And the fact that you're trying to use this technique on a totally different kind of working environment, that's why you're seeing fear not working. That's why you're seeing underperformance showing up across the board, because that tactic doesn't apply to the task and it's actually impacting performance in a negative way.
Yeah. Yeah. As soon as you said the word, when you talk about performance and you went performance, well, let's talk about mental performance, which translates into sales performance.
Mm-hmm.
It is, I think, selling or good selling today, it's a far more cerebral activity. You have to think way more
Mm-hmm.
because you have to help your customers think way more. That involves being on the ball and sharp and, you know, top of your game, doesn't it? And what you're saying is we're not in the best position to do that for ourselves, let alone help someone else to do that.
Yeah, I mean, not even like that's one piece of it for sure, is to be able to execute the task to your best of the ability. But on the other side of it, if you think about what makes a successful seller, you want them to be curious, is a kind of a big word that I always hear. They need to be curious and they need to be empathetic. Well, guess what part of your brain needs to be online to be curious, to be empathetic, to really kind of feel those emotions of the buyer? Well, it all comes from, the prefrontal cortex, which is in the front of your brain. But that part of your brain gets harder and harder and more difficult to use when your mental health starts to decline and the limbic system in your brain starts to ramp up. That's why you start to get emotional. It's very hard to be kind to someone if you're feeling stressed or you're feeling overwhelmed or you're feeling afraid, because your body switches from looking outward and sort of is trying to serve a community and starts to switch to its self-protection system that is only focused on trying to keep you safe. You specifically, it's very selfish. Its only goal is to make sure that you survive the end of the day. And that is not the right part of the brain that needs to be on and functioning when you're trying to be empathetic and be curious and kind of relate and connect to someone.
You literally just can't. Your brain will not let you. If I'm right,
you physically can't. Like, it's just
fMRI showing that the blood is actually going to different parts. It's turned off effectively. Is that?
Yeah, to certain when you get overly stressed, this is like stress driving it. Like cortisol, so stress is a good thing.
Yeah.
Like that's a good part. Like that's going to help you focus. It's going to help you use your prefrontal cortex to a certain extent. But when that stress level, that cortisol and that adrenaline and norepinephrine gets too high, then things start to shut down, and it starts to default to this other quicker, more reactional part of your brain that is not as effective at making decisions or problem solving or using logical reasoning.
And then what you're trying to do, you can't do, and then you get more stressed by that. Angry with yourself, you get to that. You're into a vicious circle, aren't you? Because it's and you try to push through, you push through, because in the past we've been told that's what you do.
But let's if you take that one step farther as well, it's like you get worse at your performance, which means you have to work harder. Yeah. Which means you don't take the proper steps to recharge. So then your performance continues to suffer. So you have to work harder. Your performance suffers. You have to work harder and harder. And then you're in this nasty spiral of a situation where you're performing so poorly, and you think that the only thing that you can do is to keep working harder. And that's why people burn out or leave jobs or can't kind of be there for themselves or their family on a daily basis.
Because your only answer is to work harder, because your brain isn't working to help you figure out what a smarter answer might be. Yeah,
exactly.
It's really cruel, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, like it's very cruel. And I mean, like the way like if we go back to sort of like the fear-based management and sort of leadership and what's being used today, and when someone's in that cycle, like things like throwing a lot of money or saying, here's this big reward if you do X, or you're going to lose your job if you do, whatever, or if you don't kind of hit your target, that's exasperating that downward spiral. That's speaking to that highly emotional brain saying, I really want all that money. Like that is a very dopamine driven sort of thing to work towards. So even if your performance isn't necessarily suffering just yet, but you're feeling burnt out, you're going to continue to work harder past the point that you should, because you're so emotional that you want all that money, or you're afraid
Mm.
of losing your job. And it's that downward spiral that continues, that structurally speaking is happening based on how sales teams are being motivated with extrinsic motivators like rewards and punishment.
So what do we know? Is that all? Oh God, but no, it's, and I'm sure people will be listening to this and thinking, I'm recognizing some of this, in
Mm-hmm.
some way, shape, or form. And hopefully not at the most extreme worst end. I mean, hopefully not at all. But what can we do about it? I mean, that's what we need to start thinking about. Perhaps can we start with what an individual might do? If they
Mm-hmm.
recognize that, and then we can get into, okay, big bosses, here's what you need to be fronting up to do.
Yeah, I mean, totally. Like, I think it's like a very, from an individual standpoint, there's a lot that you can be doing. I think step one is you really need to have sort of a basic underlying set like of tools, whether that's sort of mindset strategies or stress management strategies or resilience kind of strategies that you can kind of build into your day and restructure your day to kind of help you kind of add and offload stress in equal parts within a 24-hour period. I think a lot of the time when we think about vacation, we try to offload stress all at once. We sort of work for 4 months or 5 months, and then we say, I got vacation, let's kind of get rid of all the stress. And up into that point where we leave, our performance is being impacted, versus developing a daily process, like I said, that allows you to add stress, good stress of performing, and offload it in equal parts. So there's basic things you can do. I mean, like, we could talk about this for hours, but if you want to say things, if you need sort of some basic things, it could be bookending your day with a self-care startup strategy and shutdown strategy. So, what are you doing to prepare your body for the start of the day to help get it warmed up? So for me, it usually looks like exercise, a morning meditation, and then typically a walk outside or a cold shower, and then a place to offload stress at the end and make a plan for tomorrow. So I have a shutdown routine, which consists of planning out my next day and making a to-do list. Might include journaling about what went really well that day and sort of practicing some gratitude on the progress that was being made. And then again, maybe more time outside or calling my parents, things that, basic things that we can be doing on a daily basis. It's really important to be consistent with that. Other things that you could be doing is, I really like the HALT framework. So checking in on yourself consistently throughout the day by asking yourself to HALT. And that stands for, are you hungry? Are you angry? Are you lonely? And are you tired? Essentially, when any of those buckets are running on empty, if you're feeling hungry, if you're feeling angry or dealing with a difficult emotion, if you're feeling lonely or you're feeling tired, that's going to start to impact your mental health and your performance overall. So pausing throughout the day to check to make sure these buckets are on full and you're taking care of yourself. Very simple thing to help you be more mindful of taking care of yourself on a regular basis. So again, there's all sorts of stuff.
No,
sorry,
but there are no, and I sense you think, oh, I could go keep talking, but okay, let me sort of be devil's advocate. Use a bit of sales language here. Let me throw in an objection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm too busy to do this. Of course you are, because you are trying to catch up back on the stuff, and that's what's causing the problem. The things that you've said there, like exercise in the morning, meditate, end of the day journaling, they don't have to take a long time, do they? I mean, you can do short, impactful versions. Am I right on that?
100%. Like, it's all about being consistent. Like, it's very like there's like consistency is, and taking micro actions every day will do way more for your mental health and your performance overall than trying to make one sweeping large change, like we see people make, where they feel like they have to quit a job and leave entirely. Like, you don't have to get to that point if you sort of make micro changes up into that. Another thing you can think about is, if things like exercising every day, if things like, eating healthy, if they're, avoiding alcohol, for example, if these things are challenging to do, then it's really important to think about it from another perspective. Like, what is blocking me from taking those actions? What are the distractions? What are the, how am I using my time that's preventing me from doing these things on a regular basis?
Yeah. Yeah. So really, it's not an objection. You can do these things. And it's interesting what you said there is the consistency element is what we're looking for. And then the thing, I've actually never come across the HALT thing. I think that's pretty cool. You could set your phone, set your watch, set a timer to go off at a certain time. It's
Totally
going to distract you. Have a look at that. Oh, it's my HALT time.
Yeah.
2
Yeah.
minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I mean, how long does it? Seconds?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Whatever. It'll just keep you accountable to basic things like eating lunch every day, which a lot of people have a tendency to skip, right? But
lunch is for wimps, Jeff. Lunch is for wimps. I mean, that's such a stupid. Well, you've heard it, haven't you? People say this. It's like, oh, please.
Or it's saying things like, I don't need lunch. Like I can, and it's like, no, you can't fight however many thousands of years of evolution to say you're skipping lunch and it's not going to make you more like impact your performance in the afternoon. Like it just doesn't work that way.
It's like I said, I don't need to put petrol in my car if I'm driving on a radial journey. It'll
it's the exact
stop.
same thing. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Okay, so we can certainly do stuff like that. So that's from the individual point of view. Is set of tools, which it sounds like habit actually. You think consistency, habit. So doing these things, be kind to yourself. You get one chance at this at this stuff. So
I mean, there's like hundreds of other things you can be doing, and just I guess not to plug my own self, but I created Sales Health Alliance to be a resource first and a business second. So there's roughly 140, 150 free resources on the site of like practical strategies that you can be taking. So that would be another good place to kind of start learning about this. It's like building your own toolkit. And then I have an online program as well, where for individuals to stress less and sell more. That again is really practical strategies tackling things like, what's the best way to sleep in sales? What's the best way to exercise? What's the best way to, structure, and overcome a stressor, like starting back at 0 every month? Or how do you actually break down and take apart negative thoughts in a highly effective way using a framework? Like that's all part of making yourself more mentally healthy, a high performer, and more resilient.
Yeah, no, one of the best plugs I've ever had on this podcast. No, seriously, Jeff. We will pop links to those in the show notes. Definitely put that there. Okay then, so stuff that individuals can do. Take a bit of responsibility for yourself. I guess we do have to put it a little bit like that. What responsibility does management have in this? The mic is yours. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, like they have a tremendous responsibility to sort of create an environment where people feel psychologically safe. There's all of the research and things, really good data and studies that people just aren't listening to right now. Is your aim as a leadership team should be to create an environment where people feel safe to show up and perform their best. The thing is like when we are operating in fear, we are unable to perform our best. When we are safe and that logical or that emotional part of our brain is offline, we are able to perform better. So what do we think about when it comes to safety? Well, it's like we talked about at the start of this. It's getting really good at identifying blind spots and from a leadership style that's going to be, impacting, our relationships negatively because of maybe how we were brought up or limiting the beliefs that we have as a leader. That's really sort of important to help to start identifying. It's leading with vulnerability. If leaders are more vulnerable and open to talking about times when they struggled throughout their career, or opening up and sharing, on days when they're struggling, what's going on, that's going to help create safety and help reps in your team feel like they can trust you to be more vulnerable when they're struggling. That's another aspect of it. Paying people well. If you want to, make sure that people aren't worried and stressed about paying their bills and their rent every month, well, you have to pay them a decent wage. And that's something that, a lot of salespeople struggle with. If they have sort of that 50-50 base commission structure, it's very hard for that person to not worry about the bills and then simultaneously focus on making a perfect demo or cold call if they're trending behind target. It just makes that very difficult. There's things like really investing into having a clear understanding of your vision and a deep purpose of what your company is all about. People want to connect and work for organizations that they believe are meaningful and making a difference in the world. But that all gets lost when, as a leader, you're only leading with the only thing that's important is hitting a target. That's not motivating. But connecting that target to the impact you're making on a global community or a certain community of buyers that you're serving every single day, that's critical to have. And you can't build that vision and you can't transfer that purpose onto others if you're living in a spreadsheet and living in Salesforce every single day. So those are some, again, another thing that we could talk about for hours.
I know. No, I think you're doing a brilliant job on sort of keeping the sort of the headline acts there. This stuff is all trainable, learnable. This can be part of something that a manager learns how to do. Correct?
100%. And that's really what my whole business is really focused on exactly that. It's sort of equipping sellers with sort of those practical strategies to help them perform best. But then the other side of the coin is helping create an environment where, that also supports that type of thing. I think where a lot of, mindset coaches or peak performance coaches or the Tony Robbins of the world, where these people really, they have really good content and their stuff works well. But what we're failing to forget is if you inspire someone and you give them that really practical toolkit and they're like, yes, I saw Tony Robbins, I'm going to change my life. And, I'm going to be so motivated at work and all this great, using what they said. If that person is then consistently showing up to a toxic workplace every single day, it doesn't matter what that toolkit is. Over time, it's going to get worn down if that environment is toxic. So I've tried to look at it as more of a holistic approach where it's individual and organizational environment based. Those two need to be together if you want to make real change and not only helping people feel better, but also helping them perform their best.
No, it's such an important area. Why? That's probably a tough one. Why don't you think we're talking about this more? I mean, like I said, I said to you before we hit record again, I've Chris Hatfield came on the podcast a year ago. I've done 100 podcasts. We spoke about mental health twice. So yeah, I'm not perfect here. Why aren't we talking about this stuff more?
Tons of different reasons. Like I think there's still a lot of stigma around mental health in general. I think I'll give sort of like 3 points, I guess. So I think stigma is a piece.
Yeah.
What's really interesting about COVID is COVID gave us essentially the perfect playbook on how to break stigma. And my example is, I don't know when you got COVID or if you got COVID, but for those of, the people that got COVID very early on in the process, what happened? They were afraid. They were like, oh my God, I have COVID. Am I going to die? Like no one else has COVID. And they may or may not share that with other people. And they're really embarrassed, really difficult emotions. And then over the course of 2 or 3 years, thousands of millions, billions of conversations took place, articles took place, education took place, all of this stuff took place. And if you and I get COVID tomorrow, it's like, no big deal. I'm telling my friends and family, like, I know what to do. There's all of these different, like, it's been normalized, right?
Yeah.
That hasn't happened from a mental health standpoint. And even worse within sales, where there's a lot of stigma, that kind of normalization of this isn't feeling, negative or down on yourself after a bad call. There's nothing wrong with you. It's normal. Like, but here's how we can do it. Let's talk about it. Let's do all these different things. So COVID gave a perfect playbook to break stigma. And we just have to do that from a mental health standpoint. I think the education piece is a big one. It's sort of, that whole idea of defining mental health as mental illness. We have to get better at, no, it is a spectrum of well-being, and here's why it's important performance, and really connecting that.
I was thinking about the COVID playbook that you were talking about, and like, wow, yes. Yeah. How quickly do we develop for that?
Totally.
You know,
I
it was like you got it from someone. You didn't want to say in case you gave it. Now it's just, oh, I got COVID. Okay.
yeah,
Oh, how bad? Okay, well, hope you get better soon. It's like,
yeah,
you know,
easy. But that's
it's
what we need to
amazing.
happen. The thing that I was going to say is we also need to start moving towards, this idea that we start, bringing more well-being data into the workplace, not these, BS NPS scores or surveys around, will people recommend our company to others? Like all of that kind of BS. It's like, who cares? That doesn't tell you anything. It just
Mm.
identifies a problem. And more getting into, how's our team sleeping? How connected are they to our, do they feel like they're doing meaningful work on a regular basis? Do they have strong boundaries with work? Are they able to protect, like, what's their level of self-esteem? Like, these are the real leading indicators that are going to be driving the lagging indicators, like how many calls they're making, how many emails they're sending, what their sales cycle is, their close rates. But that whole idea of how people are showing up every single day is still just a complete black box from an organizational standpoint.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it?
Well,
But it's worth doing is the point, I
I
think.
will say it isn't that hard either. So I've
Okay.
recently partnered with a data and analytics company that has, I'm starting to bring a lot of this data and analytics to my clients, and we're getting really cool insights, like things that are showing. So for example, this one company that I'm working with right now, we were able to show this team, and it was really interesting to see that half of the team was unhappy and another half of the team was very unhappy. And the team members that were happy had very high retention scores, and the ones that were unhappy had very low retention scores. And as we started to pull apart the data, we were able to see that this is likely coming down to a leadership style. The leader has a very polarizing leadership style where people either love them or they cannot stand them. So it's now I'm working with that leader to help them identify, how do you ask your team to uncover some of these blind spots or some of these things that you're doing that are impacting certain members on your team. Like, that's basic stuff that you can be that
Yeah.
to how you leverage data to a high level.
I don't think I've ever been so happy to have been proved wrong. Well, no, what I'm thinking is your email open rates, and people will mess about forever with open rates to get an extra point something of a percent, and with titles and subjects, and you're
Yeah.
saying, hang on a minute, leave that, put a bit of time and effort into here, because actually the performance improvements you can get, and we can measure and we can prove, is
I mean,
very, very doable.
yeah. If
Mm.
if someone's sleeping 6 hours a night and you help them get to sleeping 7 hours a night, all of that stuff is going to be, whether it's email open rates, whether it's subject lines, whatever you're talking about, like, that's one of many
Yeah.
thousands of metrics you can look at from well-being that's going to impact all of it. So
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah, no, as I say, people get fascinated measuring those things already. So what we say
Yeah.
is that stop measuring some of that stuff to the whatever degree, and start measuring just a few of these things that you say you can actually now give access to, which is
Totally.
going to have considerable impact on
Exactly.
someone's life
Yeah.
as well, like outside of work. I mean, that's probably the greatest gift someone could give anyway. So,
1,000%.
oh, we could carry on. We could carry on about this. It is something I'm starting to think way more about. I'm gonna make a commitment now. I'm gonna start push it more.
Hmm.
Talk about it a little bit more. Thank you so much for coming on, starting to share. We will definitely get those links
Hmm.
into the show notes. Sorry. Where can people get in touch with you?
Best place is saleshealthalliance.com. Like I said, it's just packed full of resources. I have a book coming out in February as well, so that would be a good thing to pick up. Stress less, sell more. And then LinkedIn. I'm active on LinkedIn Mondays through Friday, posting content. And that would be best. So connect, send me a direct message or an email, and yeah, happy to kind of pick up the conversation if it's something that your organization or your sales team is looking for.
Will you come back and talk to us when the book's being launched?
Yeah, let's do it. Very cool.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Oh, excellent. Jeff, thank you so much. Really important stuff. And I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, Fred. Appreciate to be on. And again, happy to hear that you're going to start talking more about it. Like everyone that's sort of stepping in is and creating awareness is a we need more champions like you. So amazing.
You've been listening to the Sales Today podcast with me, your host, Fred Copestake. If you like what you've heard, why not subscribe so you know when the latest episodes become available? Take a look at my YouTube channel. All episodes are available there, along with extra material all about modern selling. Connect with me on LinkedIn, where I'll share more information around collaborative selling, all part of my mission around having good people doing good things in a good way.